Fire speaks to those the moon has marked for suffering. The flames danced in her palms like living serpents, amber and crimson tongues licking at the winter air. Sarah knelt before the hearth in the abandoned chapel, her breath visible in the cold, her eyes fixed on the visions writhing within the inferno. A child would drown before sunrise. An elder would choke on his final meal. A warrior would fall to his brother's blade before the week's end. Death after death, unfolding like petals of a poisoned rose. She had seen them all her life, these fragments of fate written in smoke and ember. The gift her pack called a curse. The power that made her mother weep and her father turn away. The reason Alpha Garrett had rejected her at the altar 3 winters past, his words sharp as frost. I will not bind myself to an omen of death. The chapel walls held the cold like a tomb. Snow drifted through the broken roof, settling on stone pews where no congregation had gathered in decades. This was her sanctuary now, exile's reward for the sin of seeing too much. The fire crackled, and a new vision formed. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, moving through a forest of black pines. Blood streaked his armor, dark as oil against steel. His eyes, silver, ancient, weary, searched the darkness as if hunting something he knew he'd never find. A crown sat heavy on his brow, forged from iron and grief. Sarah's breath caught. She had never seen him before, yet recognition pierced her chest like an arrow. This was no random death she witnessed. This was something else entirely. The vision shifted. The man stumbled, falling to his knees in deep snow. Wolves circled him, not natural beasts, but shadows with eyes of molten gold. He reached for his sword, but his hand trembled, weak, dying. Then the flames went black. Sarah gasped and pulled back, her hands scorched from holding the vision too long. The fire in the hearth returned to ordinary orange and yellow, crackling innocently as if it had revealed nothing at all. Darkness. Her visions never went dark. They showed death, yes, but always in vivid, terrible detail. Never this. Void. She wrapped her threadbare cloak tighter around her shoulders and stood, her knees protesting after hours of kneeling. The chapel door hung crooked on its hinges, offering little protection from the northern wind that howled through the valley like a chorus of the damned. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly under a swollen moon. Somewhere in those woods, the man from her vision was dying, or perhaps already dead. It was not her concern. The living had made that clear when they cast her out. But the darkness lingered in her mind, a hole where knowledge should be, an absence that felt more terrifying than any death she'd ever foreseen. What could silence a Pathfinder's gift? What force could turn her flames black? Sarah moved to the doorway and stared into the night. The moon hung fat and silver above the pines, its light painting the snow in shades of pearl and ash. Beautiful, merciless. A howl rose from the forest, closer than before. Her hand moved instinctively to the small knife at her belt, barely more than a letter opener, but all she'd been allowed to take when they banished her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, body tensed for flight. Then she heard it. Footsteps crunching through snow, uneven, stumbling. A figure emerged from the tree line. The man from her vision. Blood-streaked armor, iron crown, silver eyes that found hers across the clearing with the inevitability of fate recognizing itself. He took 3 more steps before collapsing face first into the snow. Sarah should have run, should have barred the door and let the forest claim him. She owed nothing to dying kings or desperate strangers. The world had taken everything from her, pack, family, future, and asked for gratitude in return. But her feet carried her forward anyway, through snow that bit at her ankles, toward the fallen monarch who had somehow walked straight out of her darkened flames. She knelt beside him and turned him over. His face was pale beneath the blood, strong-featured and lined with exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. This was a man who had forgotten how to rest, who carried his kingdom like Atlas carried the sky, because no one else could, and to let go meant annihilation. His eyes flickered open. Silver met amber. "You," he breathed, voice raw as winter wind. "The fire showed me. You." Her hands stilled on his chest, where blood seeped through torn leather. "What did you see?" "Nothing." His laugh was broken glass. "For the first time in my cursed existence, I saw nothing but darkness, and your face within it." The words struck her like a blade between ribs. He was like her, cursed with sight, burdened with knowing, but where her flames showed death, what did his visions reveal? And why had they both seen only void? "Can you walk?" She glanced toward the forest, where shadows moved with predatory intent. The wolves, or whatever they were, would return soon. No. His hand caught her wrist, grip surprisingly strong for a dying man. "But you will not leave me here. The goddess does not show her pathfinders to kings without reason. I am no one's pathfinder. I am exiled, rejected, forgotten. Then we are matched." His eyes held hers with an intensity that burned brighter than any flame she'd ever conjured. "I am Theron Ashenmaw, king of the Northern Reach, alpha of the Iron Peak Pack, and I have been searching for you my entire reign." The moon pulsed overhead, bright as accusation, bright as hope. Sarah made her choice. She hooked her arm beneath his shoulders and hauled him to his feet. He was impossibly heavy, muscle and armor and the weight of 1,000 unspoken burdens. Together they stumbled toward the chapel, leaving a trail of blood dark as prophecy across virgin snow. Behind them, golden eyes watched from the shadows. And the moon, ancient and knowing, offered no answers, only the promise that nothing would ever be simple again. The chapel offered little comfort, but it was warmer than the killing cold outside. Sarah dragged Theron to the space before the hearth, where embers still glowed like dying stars. His armor clanked against stone as she lowered him, each movement drawing a grunt of pain he tried to swallow. "Your wounds," she said, reaching for the buckles at his chest. "Let me see." His hand caught hers again, gentler this time. "You should not touch a king uninvited." "Then die with your formalities intact." She pulled away and moved toward the fire, adding wood from her meager pile. "I have seen enough death tonight. One more will not burden me." Silence stretched between them, broken only by crackling flames and his labored breathing. Then came the sound of leather and metal being removed, reluctant, pained, but compliant. When she turned back, he had shed the armor. His tunic was soaked through with blood, torn in 3 places across his ribs where claws had opened flesh like parchment. The wounds were deep but clean. Whatever had attacked him had meant to kill, not to maim. "Shadow wolves," he said, following her gaze. "They hunt in packs of 7. I killed 4 before I ran. Cowardice or strategy? Survival." His voice carried no shame. "A dead king serves no one." She knelt beside him with a strip of cloth torn from her own cloak and a bowl of snow she'd heated over the fire. The water was barely warm, but it would have to suffice. As she cleaned the first wound, he hissed through his teeth but did not pull away. "You are far from your kingdom, Alpha King." "I am exactly where the visions led me." His silver eyes tracked her movements with uncomfortable precision. 6 months I have walked this cursed land, following fragments of prophecy and fever dreams. They all pointed here, to this chapel, to you. I am nothing. No pack, no family, no... You are a pathfinder. The certainty in his voice allowed no argument. "You see death in flames. I see futures in blood. We are mirrors, Omega. 2 halves of a gift the goddess divided long ago." Her hands stilled. "What do you see when you bleed? Choices, Crossroads, moments where kingdoms rise or fall on a single decision. He winced as she pressed harder against a wound. But lately, only darkness, a void where futures should be, as if every path forward has been erased. That is what I saw in the flames tonight. When your face appeared, everything went black. Theron's jaw tightened. Then we are both blind, and something in this world wants us that way. She bound his wounds with efficient hands, years of solitude having taught her basic medicine. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and studied him properly for the first time. Without the armor, he looked younger, perhaps 30 winters, though his eyes carried the weight of far more. Scars crossed his arms and chest like a map of battles won and lost. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tangled with snow and blood. A king, here, in her exile's sanctuary. "Why did they reject you?" he asked quietly. The question landed like a stone in still water, rippling through every defense she'd built. "Because death follows me. Every vision I share comes true within days. Crops fail, children sicken, warriors fall. They called me cursed. Said I carried the goddess's punishment for sins my bloodline committed generations ago. And the Alpha who was to claim you? He called me an omen of ruin. Said he would not curse his future heirs with my poisoned gift." The words still tasted like ash. The pack agreed, so here I remain, where I can harm no one. "You saved my life tonight." "I delayed your death. There is a difference." Theron reached up and caught her chin, tilting her face toward the firelight. His touch was warm despite the cold, calloused but careful. "You saw darkness when you should have seen my end. That means something, Sarah. The goddess does not rob her seers of sight without purpose." "How do you know my name?" "The same way you knew to come when I fell, because we are written in each other's fate, whether we wish it or not." She pulled away from his touch, pulse hammering. "Fate is what weak men blame when they lack the courage to choose." "Agreed." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So choose. Send me back into the snow, or let me stay until the wounds close. Either way, I will not force your hand." Outside, a howl rose, long, mournful, hungry. The shadow wolves had found the blood trail. Sarah moved to the door and barred it with the rotted timber that served as her only lock. It would not hold against a determined assault, but it might buy them time. She returned to the fire and added more wood, building the flames higher until orange light danced across the chapel walls. "You will stay," she said, "but in the morning you leave. I will not have a king's death on my conscience." "Fair enough." He settled back against the stone, exhaustion finally claiming him. "Though I suspect the goddess has other plans. The goddess abandoned me the day my gift manifested. Or perhaps she saved you for this moment." Sarah said nothing. She wrapped herself in her cloak and sat across from him, close enough to the fire to feel its heat, but far enough from the wounded king to maintain the illusion of distance. But even as she closed her eyes, she felt the pull, magnetic, inevitable, terrifying. This man who bled prophecy as she burned with it. This Alpha who had walked through winter's teeth to find her. The flames crackled between them, and for the first time in 3 years, Sarah did not look into them for visions. She was afraid of what darkness she might see. Dawn broke cold and gray, painting the chapel in shades of pewter and bone. Sarah woke to the sound of movement, careful, pained, but determined. She opened her eyes to find Theron on his feet, testing his weight against the wall. "You should rest." Her voice was rough with sleep. "I have rested enough." He turned, and she saw the fresh blood seeping through the bandages. "The shadow wolves will return tonight. I need to be ready." "You need to heal. Healing is a luxury I surrendered when I took the crown." He crossed to the window, barely more than a gap in crumbling stone, and stared into the forest. "They are out there, watching, waiting for nightfall. Sarah rose and moved to his side. Through the narrow opening, she could see them, dark shapes moving between trees, patient as death itself, 7 of them, just as he'd said. Their eyes caught the weak morning light and reflected it back as molten gold. What are they? Hunters sent by someone who wants me dead. His voice was flat, matter of fact. The list of candidates is unfortunately long. You are a beloved king, I see. I am a necessary one. There is a difference. He glanced at her. Power breeds enemies like corpses breed flies. The stronger the crown, the sharper the knives pointed at your back. She understood that better than he knew. Power, even the twisted gift of foresight, made you dangerous, and dangerous things had to be controlled or destroyed. Can you fight? She asked. With one arm tied behind my back and a belly full of poison, yes, but I would prefer better odds. He tested his sword arm, rotating the shoulder with a grimace. The wounds are deep. I need another day before I can face them properly. You do not have another day. Then we find another way. Sarah looked at the shadow wolves, then at the chapel's pitiful defenses, then at the dying fire. An idea formed, dangerous, possibly foolish, but perhaps their only chance. I can hide us, she said slowly. Not physically, but I can make the flames show them something else. A false vision. If they rely on more than sight to hunt, it might buy us time. Theron studied her with those unsettling silver eyes. That kind of manipulation takes enormous power. You could burn yourself out trying. I could. Or I could watch you bleed to death fighting 7 creatures while wounded. Choose which risk you prefer, Alpha King. A real smile touched his face this time. Brief, but genuine. I see why your pack feared you. That tongue is sharper than any claw. My tongue is all I have left. Not true. He reached out and touched her temple, his fingers warm against her skin. You have this. A gift that terrifies them because they cannot control it, cannot weaponize it, cannot understand it. His hand dropped. I know what that costs, to be needed and reviled in the same breath. The words struck something deep in her chest, a recognition she had never expected to find. He understood. This king, this stranger, this wounded alpha saw the isolation that came with cursed sight. Tell me about your visions, she said. How they work. Theron moved back to the fire and sat, gesturing for her to join him. When I bleed, I see moments of consequence, battles before they begin, alliances before they shatter, deaths before the blade falls. The blood shows me what could be, and I must choose which path to walk. And lately, only darkness, as if someone, or something, has severed my connection to the goddess. He stared into the flames. 6 months ago, the vision stopped showing me anything but void, and within that void, I saw your face. Just once, just long enough to know I had to find you. Why would the goddess show you an exiled Omega? Because you are the key. He said it with absolute conviction. To what? I do not yet know, but the goddess does not pair pathfinders without reason, fire and blood, death and choice. We are meant to walk the same road, Sarah. She wanted to argue, wanted to deny the pull she felt toward this man, this king, this impossible complication in her careful solitude. But the darkness in her flames had been real. The void where his death should have been written was real. If I help you survive tonight, she said carefully, what happens after? After, you come with me. To your kingdom? Where I would be? Protected, valued, given purpose beyond counting deaths and living in ruins. He leaned forward. I need a pathfinder at my side, Sarah. Someone who can see what I cannot. Someone strong enough to bear the weight of terrible knowledge without breaking. I'm broken already. No, you are bent. There is a difference. Outside, the shadow wolves began to circle closer. The day was wasting, and nightfall would bring blood. Sarah stood and moved to her small cache of supplies, herbs, roots, the few possessions she'd managed to carry into exile. Among them was a vial of her own blood, drawn during the new moon and preserved with salt. She had kept it for emergencies, for moments when ordinary fire would not suffice. "If we do this," she said, holding up the vial, "there is no going back. The flames will bind us together temporarily. You will feel what I feel, see what I see. It will hurt. Everything worth doing hurts." Theron stood and offered his wrist. "Take what you need." She uncorked the vial and poured her blood into her palm, then took his hand and drew his knife across his wrist, shallow, controlled. His blood welled dark and mixed with hers, pooling in her cupped hands. "Repeat after me," she said. "By fire and blood, by moon and shadow, by the goddess who marks us both, I bind my fate to yours until the dawn breaks twice." He repeated the words without hesitation, his voice steady and sure. Sarah threw the mixed blood into the fire. The flames exploded upward, turning from orange to deep crimson, then to silver white. Heat washed over them both, and suddenly she could feel him, his pain, his exhaustion, his iron will holding everything together by sheer force of determination. And he could feel her, the loneliness, the fear, the carefully controlled rage at a world that had discarded her. Through their joined consciousness, she reached into the flames and began to weave. False visions poured from the fire like smoke, spreading through the forest. The shadow wolves would see their prey fleeing north, leaving a trail of blood and fear. They would chase phantoms while she and Theron remained hidden, invisible behind a curtain of living flame. It took everything she had. Sweat poured down her face. Her hands shook with effort. But she held the vision steady, feeding it with blood and will and desperate hope. When the last of the wolves disappeared into the forest, chasing illusions, she collapsed. Theron caught her before she hit the floor, his wounded arm bedamned. He lowered her gently by the fire and brushed damp hair from her face. "Rest," he murmured. "I will keep watch. The binding. We'll hold until dawn breaks twice, I know." His hand stayed on her shoulder, warm and solid. "Sleep, Pathfinder. You have earned it." As consciousness faded, Sarah heard him speak one last time, words meant for her ears, or perhaps only for the goddess. "I will not let you fall. This I swear." And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. She woke to firelight and the smell of cooking meat. Sarah sat up slowly, her head pounding from the effort of weaving false visions. The chapel was warmer than before. Theron had stoked the fire high and somehow procured food. A rabbit roasted on a makeshift spit, fat dripping into the flames with soft hisses. "You should not be hunting with those wounds," she said. He glanced over from where he sat, sharpening his blade against a whetstone. "I set a snare before dawn." The forest provided. His silver eyes studied her. "How do you feel?" "Like I tried to hold back a river with my bare hands." An apt description for blood magic. He set aside the blade and turned the rabbit. "The binding weakened you more than you expected." It was not a question. Through the thread of magic connecting them, he had felt every moment of her struggle, just as she had felt his wounds, his exhaustion, his stubborn refusal to show weakness. "The binding will fade in another day," she said. "Then you will not have to endure my burdens." "Perhaps I do not wish it to fade." The words hung between them like smoke. Sarah looked away, focusing on the fire rather than the complicated expression on his face. "The shadow wolves are still out there," she said, changing the subject. "I can feel them, circling, waiting. They are patient hunters. Theron pulled the rabbit from the fire and divided it with his knife. But they cannot track what they cannot see. Your illusion will hold until tomorrow's dawn. He handed her a portion of the meat. She ate mechanically, barely tasting it, her mind racing through possibilities. When the binding broke, the wolves would return. And Theron, despite his bravado, was still wounded, still weak. "You asked earlier what happens after tonight," he said, breaking the silence. "I will answer more fully now." He set aside his food and leaned forward. "My kingdom is at war, Sarah. Not with blades and armies, but with shadows and whispers. Someone is hunting the gifted, pathfinders, seers, healers, anyone who carries the goddess's mark. They disappear in the night. Some are found dead. Others are never found at all." Her stomach tightened. Why? Power, control, fear. He gestured to the darkness beyond the walls. "Those shadow wolves? They are just one weapon in an arsenal I barely understand. Someone has learned to twist nature itself, to corrupt what the goddess made holy. And you think I can help stop this? I think you are the only one who can." His gaze was intense, burning. "Fire reveals what blood conceals. Your visions show death, but what if they could show more? What if together our gifts could see the enemy before they strike?" That is a large assumption. Based on evidence. He stood and moved to the window, checking the forest. "The moment my visions went dark, yours did too. Not coincidence. Someone silenced us both, because together we pose a threat." Sarah rose and joined him at the window. The shadow wolves prowled in the distance, restless and hungry. "If I come with you, I put your kingdom at risk. Death follows me, Theron. Everyone I have ever cared for has... Everyone you have ever cared for feared you first." He turned to face her. "They saw your gift and called it a curse. They rejected you before giving you a chance to prove your worth. I am not asking you to change who you are, Sarah. I am asking you to stop hiding it." The words cut deeper than any blade, because he was right. She had spent 3 years in this chapel, alone and forgotten, convinced she was better off apart from the world, convinced her gift made her toxic. What if I fail? The question came out smaller than she intended. Then we fail together. His hand found hers, fingers threading through hers with surprising tenderness. "I have carried my crown alone for 15 years, Pathfinder. I am tired. Tired of choosing between impossible options. Tired of bleeding for futures that never materialize. Tired of ruling a kingdom I can barely protect." He squeezed her hand. "Let me be tired with someone who understands." Sarah's breath caught. Through the binding, she felt the truth of his exhaustion, the crushing weight of responsibility, the isolation of power, the fear of failing everyone who depended on him. He wore his strength like armor, but beneath it, he was as fractured as she was. "I do not know how to be anything other than alone," she whispered. "Then we learn together." The fire crackled between them, casting their shadows long against the chapel walls. Outside, the false dawn she had woven was beginning to fade. Soon the illusion would break entirely, and the wolves would return. But for this moment, standing in the firelight with her hand in his, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a different future. One where her gift was not a burden, but a purpose. Where her visions served rather than cursed. Where she was not alone. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "I will not be your ornament. I will not hide in your castle while others fight. I would not ask you to. I will use my gift as I see fit, even if my visions displease you. I am counting on it. And if I see your death in the flames, I will not lie to spare your feelings." His smile was sharp as winter. "I would be disappointed if you did." She studied him for a long moment. This king, who had walked through snow and shadow to find her, who offered partnership instead of pity, who looked at her cursed gift and saw strength. "Then I accept," she said. "When the dawn breaks again, I will follow you north." Theron raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture both courtly and surprisingly intimate. "Then we survive tonight together, and tomorrow we begin your training." "Training? You think manipulating shadow wolves is the extent of what you can do?" His eyes gleamed with something that might have been excitement. "Sarah, you have barely scratched the surface of your power. What you did yesterday was impressive. What I will teach you to do is terrifying." Despite everything, the wounds, the danger, the impossible situation, Sarah felt something foreign bloom in her chest. Hope. "Show me," she said, and as the false dawn faded and true night descended, Theron began to teach her what it meant to be not just a pathfinder, but a weapon. Night fell like a curtain, and with it came the wolves. Sarah stood at the chapel's center, hands raised, flames dancing between her fingers. The fire no longer merely showed her death. Now, under Theron's instruction, she was learning to shape it, to command it. "Focus," he said from his position by the door, sword drawn despite his wounds. "The flames respond to will, not fear. You are not asking them to show you visions. You are telling them what to become." She closed her eyes and breathed. Through the binding, she could feel his certainty, his absolute faith in her capability. It steadied her. The fire grew. It spread from her hands to the hearth, then climbed the walls like living ivy. Tendrils of flame wove together, forming a barrier of light and heat that sealed every gap in the chapel's defenses. The shadow wolves prowled outside, circling, testing, but they could not pass. "Good," Theron murmured. "Now make it hurt." Sarah opened her eyes and pushed harder. The flames turned from orange to white hot, radiating such intensity that snow 30 feet beyond the walls began to melt. One of the shadow wolves ventured too close and yelped as its fur singed. "They are not natural creatures," Theron explained, his voice cutting through her concentration. "Shadow and corruption given form. Fire is their antithesis. Your flames do not just burn them, they unmake them." As if to prove his point, the boldest wolf leaped at the barrier. The flames caught it mid-air and consumed it in seconds, reducing shadow and malice to nothing but ash and memory. The remaining 6 retreated, their golden eyes wary now, calculating. "They are learning," Sarah said, sweat beading on her forehead. "How long can I hold this?" "Until you cannot." Theron moved closer, standing just behind her. "But there is another way, a more permanent solution." "Which is?" "Hunt them." She turned to stare at him. "I am not a warrior. No, you are something far more dangerous." He gestured to the flames. "Fire obeys you. It moves at your command. Why contain it when you could unleash it?" The suggestion was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. For 3 years she had hidden from her power, afraid of what it might do, what it might cost. But Theron was asking her to embrace it, to weaponize her curse. "If I lose control, you will not." His hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and grounding. "I will be your anchor. Through the binding, I will keep you tethered. Trust me, Pathfinder." Sarah looked at the wolves prowling beyond her flames, at the darkness they represented, at the threat they posed not just to her and Theron, but to every gifted soul their master hunted. She made her choice. "Tell me what to do." Theron moved to stand beside her, his blood-slicked hand finding hers. "Feed the flames with intention. Picture the wolves not as they are, but as they should be, ash and memory, nothing more." She breathed deep and reached into the fire with her mind. The flames responded instantly, eager, almost hungry. She shaped them into hounds of her own, constructs of pure heat and light that burst through the chapel walls and charged into the forest. The shadow wolves scattered, but her fire hounds were faster. They pursued with single-minded purpose, guided by her will. One by one, the shadows fell. When the last wolf dissolved into nothingness, Sarah released the flames and staggered. Theron caught her, holding her upright as exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. "You did it," he said, something like awe in his voice. "Do you understand what you just accomplished? You did not just defend us, you hunted them, erased them from existence. It felt—" She struggled for words. "Right. Like the fire wanted to do this. Like I was finally using my gift the way it was meant to be used. Because you were." He guided her to sit by the hearth, which still blazed with residual heat. "The goddess does not grant power without purpose, Sarah. She marked you as a pathfinder, not to show you death, but to give you dominion over it." The words resonated in her chest, filling the hollow places exile had carved. For the first time since her rejection, she felt valuable, necessary. "What else can I learn?" she asked. Theron smiled. "Everything." They spent the rest of the night talking, not about wolves or kingdoms or threats, but about magic itself. He shared what he had learned over 15 years of bleeding visions into reality. She explained how the flames spoke to her, showed her fragments of fate written in smoke and ash. "Our gifts complement each other," he said as dawn began to lighten the sky. "I see choices. You see consequences. Together, we could navigate threats before they fully form. A king and his pathfinder." "Partners," he corrected. "I do not want a servant, Sarah. I want an equal. Someone who will tell me when I am wrong. Someone who will see what I miss." "That is dangerous. Kings rarely appreciate honesty. Most kings are fools." He stood and offered his hand. "The binding will break within the hour. When it does, we leave for the capital. 3 weeks of hard travel through winter roads. Are you prepared?" Sarah took his hand and rose. Through the window, she could see the forest bathed in early morning light, beautiful and deadly, like everything else in this cursed north. "I have spent 3 years preparing to die alone," she said. "I think I can manage preparing to live instead." His smile was fierce and genuine. "Then let us begin your resurrection, Omega." As the sun crested the horizon and the binding between them dissolved, Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Not loss, but transformation. The thread of magic that had connected them was gone, but something else remained. A foundation, a beginning, a promise of what they might become together. She gathered her few possessions while Theron donned his armor and checked his weapons. They left the chapel as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the snow. Behind them, the ruins stood silent and empty once more. Ahead, the road stretched northward into uncertainty. But for the first time in 3 years, Sarah walked it without fear. The journey north was harder than Theron had promised. Snow fell in relentless sheets, turning the world into endless white, punctuated only by black pines and gray stone. They traveled mostly in silence, saving their breath for the brutal work of moving through drifts that sometimes reached their thighs. At night, they found shelter where they could, abandoned wayhouses, hollow trees, once even a cave that stank of bear, but offered protection from the killing wind. Each evening, Sarah built a fire and Theron kept watch, his silver eyes scanning the darkness for threats. On the 5th night, huddled in a stone hut that had once served shepherds, Sarah finally asked the question that had been gnawing at her. "Why did you really come looking for me?" Theron looked up from sharpening his blade. "I told you, the visions showed you darkness and my face. That is not the same as choosing to walk through winter alone, wounded and hunted." She leaned forward. "What are you not telling me?" He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the crackling fire and wind howling outside. Then he set aside his sword and met her eyes. 2 years ago, my mate died. The words fell like stones into still water. Sarah said nothing, waiting. Her name was Liana. She was brave and kind and everything a queen should be. She gave me a son. His voice roughened. And then shadow wolves found their way into the castle, found their way into the nursery. Horror bloomed cold in Sarah's chest. She fought them, killed 3 before they brought her down. Our son survived because she placed herself between him and death. Theron's hands clenched. I was in the war room making plans, playing at strategy while my family was being slaughtered 20 feet above me. Theron. After that, the visions changed. I no longer saw possible futures, only darkness, as if the goddess was punishing me for my failure, for not being there when it mattered most. He looked at her. But in that darkness, I saw your face, just once, and I knew, the way you know the sun will rise or water will freeze, that you were the key to finding who sent those creatures, to stopping them before they take anyone else I love. Sarah's throat tightened. I cannot bring your mate back. I know, but you can help me ensure she did not die for nothing. His eyes burned with quiet intensity. You can help me make the kingdom safe enough that my son can grow up without fear of shadows in the night. She understood then. This was not about prophecy or gifts or destiny. This was about a father who had failed to protect his family and refused to fail again. A king who had lost everything and was determined to salvage meaning from the wreckage. Your son, she said. What is his name? Kieran. He is 4 years old, clever as a fox, and he asks about his mother every day. Something broke in Theron's expression. I do not know what to tell him. That she is with the goddess? That she watches over us? How do you explain to a child that monsters are real and they took his mother? Sarah moved around the fire and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. You tell him the truth. That his mother was brave. That she loved him more than her own life. That she fought so he could live. And when he asks if the monsters will come back, you tell him you are making sure they will not. She looked into the flames, seeing not visions of death, but something else. Purpose, perhaps. Or simply resolve. And you mean it. Theron's hand found hers in the darkness. Not seeking comfort exactly, but connection. Proof that he was not alone in this impossible task. I cannot promise I will not fail you, she said quietly. My visions are not infallible. I have seen deaths I could not prevent, futures I could not change. I am not asking for perfection. I am asking for partnership. He squeezed her hand. Help me hunt the shadows, Sarah. Help me make the kingdom safe. And in return, I will give you what your pack took away, purpose, protection, and a place to belong. That is a king's bargain. No, that is a father's plea. The distinction mattered. Sarah had rejected the idea of serving a king's ambition, but protecting a child from the same darkness that had consumed his mother? That was something she could believe in. I will help you, she said, not because of prophecy or binding or gifts, but because no child should grow up afraid of shadows. Then we have an accord. They sat together in silence, hands linked, watching the fire burn. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the stone hut, something fragile and important had taken root. Trust, understanding, the foundation of something that might, in time, become more than alliance. But neither of them spoke of that. Some things were better left unexamined, at least for now. Tell me about him, Sarah said eventually. Your son. What does he love? And for the first time since she had met him, Theron's face softened into something approaching peace. He loves horses and honey cakes and stories about dragons. He has his mother's eyes, green as spring leaves. And he laughs like sunshine when he is not asking impossible questions. Such as why the moon changes shape, Or where wolves go when they die, or if magic is real and can I teach him to use it? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I suspect you two will get along dangerously well. I have never been around children. Then you will learn together. He is an excellent teacher, of patience, if nothing else. They talked deep into the night, sharing stories of loss and survival, of the people they had been before the world had broken them. And somewhere in those hours, the space between them shifted from cautious alliance to something warmer. Not love, not yet, but the promise of it, like spring hidden beneath winter's snow. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. They reached the capital on the 19th day of travel, emerging from the forest to find a city carved from stone and ambition. Iron Peak rose against the mountains like a crown of gray granite, its walls thick and high, its towers reaching toward a pale winter sky. Sarah stopped at the tree line and stared. I thought you said it was a kingdom, not a fortress. It is both. Theron moved up beside her, hood pulled low to conceal his identity. We are a people forged in war. Every generation has fought for survival. Our walls reflect that history. They entered through a lesser gate, avoiding the main thoroughfare where guards would have recognized their king. Theron led her through narrow streets crowded with market stalls and morning traffic. The air smelled of smoke, roasted meat, and unwashed humanity, a stark contrast to the clean emptiness of the forest. People pressed close on all sides, and Sarah fought the urge to retreat. 3 years of solitude had not prepared her for this density of life. Stay close, Theron murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. The castle is not far. They climbed through the city's tiers, ascending stone stairs worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. At each level, the buildings grew finer, the streets wider. By the time they reached the castle gates, Sarah felt as though she had climbed a mountain. The guards recognized Theron instantly, despite his travel-stained cloak and drawn hood. They dropped to one knee, shock and relief warring on their faces. Your Majesty, we had feared. Rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Theron's voice carried command again, the warmth he had shown her in private vanishing behind royal authority. Summon the council. I have much to discuss, and prepare quarters for my guest. Guest. The word was deliberate, calculated to forestall questions. Sarah appreciated the tact, even as she recognized the complexity it implied. The castle interior was vast and cold, all stone corridors and flickering torches. Servants bowed as they passed, whispering behind raised hands. News of the king's return would spread through the palace like wildfire. Theron led her to a chamber in the east wing, spacious by her standards, with a proper bed, a hearth, and windows that overlooked the city below. After weeks of sleeping on stone and snow, the luxury felt almost obscene. Rest, he said. Eat. Bathe if you wish. I will send for you this evening. He hesitated at the door. And Sarah, thank you for walking this road with me. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in a room that felt simultaneously too large and too confining. She moved to the window and looked out at Iron Peak spread below. Thousands of lives, each one carrying their own burdens, their own fears, their own hopes. Somewhere in this city was the child she had promised to protect. Somewhere beyond these walls were the enemies who hunted the gifted. And somewhere between those two truths, she would have to find her place. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A servant entered carrying fresh clothes, followed by others bearing water for the bath and food for the table. They worked in efficient silence, transforming the room from empty chamber to welcoming quarters within minutes. When they left, Sarah bathed for the first time in 3 weeks. The hot water was heaven against travel-worn muscles, washing away dirt and doubt in equal measure. She dressed in the provided clothes, simple but well made, in shades of deep blue and gray, and forced herself to eat despite her nervous stomach. Evening came too quickly. The same servant returned to guide her through the castle's maze of corridors. They descended into the heart of the fortress, where the walls grew older and thicker, and finally stopped before a heavy door guarded by 2 warriors. "The king awaits," the servant said, bowing and retreating. The guards opened the door, and Sarah entered a chamber dominated by a round table carved from a single massive tree. A dozen people sat around it, nobles, warriors, advisors, all turning to stare at the stranger their king had brought home. Theron stood at the head of the table, no longer the wounded man she had nursed in a ruined chapel. Here he was every inch a king, commanding, powerful, absolute. But his eyes softened when they found hers, a private acknowledgement passing between them. "This is Sarah," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "She is a pathfinder, marked by the goddess and gifted with true sight. She will help us end the shadow hunts." Silence greeted the announcement. Then one of the nobles, a gray-haired man with a scar bisecting his face, spoke. "Your Majesty, with all respect, how can we trust the word of an unknown Omega? For all we know, she could be the enemy's tool, sent to deceive us." "She saved my life," Theron said flatly. "Defended me against shadow wolves when I was wounded and hunted. I trust her judgment more than I trust most of yours, Lord Garrett." Sarah's blood froze. Garrett. The name hit her like a physical blow. The scarred noble's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, I know that name. You are the Omega I rejected 3 years past, the Death Seer." Every face in the room turned toward her with renewed suspicion. She felt their judgment like knives, their fear like frost. "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "I am the Omega you cast out because you feared my gift, the same gift your king now values. Tell me, Lord Garrett, do you still believe I carry curses? Or has your king's faith given you pause?" The challenge rang through the chamber. Garrett's face darkened, but before he could respond, Theron spoke. "Sarah's past is irrelevant. Her gift is not." He turned to address the full council. For 2 years, the gifted have been disappearing. Seers, healers, those marked by the goddess, taken in the night or found dead with no explanation. We have operated blindly, reacting to attacks we cannot predict. That ends now. He gestured, and a map unrolled across the table, Iron Peak and the surrounding territories, marked with red symbols. "These are the locations where the gifted have vanished. Sarah, look at the pattern. Tell us what you see." She moved closer, studying the map with the eye of someone who had spent years reading meaning in flames and symbols. The red marks seemed random at first, scattered across the landscape without obvious connection. Then she saw it. "They form a circle," she said slowly, "with Iron Peak at the center. Whoever is taking the gifted is drawing power from a pattern, building toward something." "A ritual," one of the advisors breathed. "They are preparing a massive working." Theron's jaw tightened, and Iron Peak, with its concentration of gifted refugees and the royal bloodline, is the target. Sarah traced the circle with her finger, feeling cold certainty settle in her bones. Not just a target, a sacrifice. They are not hunting the gifted randomly. They are positioning them like pieces on a board. When the circle completes, everyone inside dies, Theron finished grimly. The council erupted into argument, some demanding immediate evacuation, others calling for war, still others questioning whether they should trust the word of an exiled Omega. Sarah stepped back from the chaos, her mind racing. Through the noise, she felt it, a tug at her consciousness, familiar and terrible, her gift stirring, demanding attention. "I need fire," she said quietly. Theron heard her despite the din. He raised his hand, and silence fell. "Clear the table. Bring braziers, now." Servants rushed to obey. Within minutes, 3 braziers burned bright around the table, their flames dancing in the still air. Sarah moved between them, letting her gift rise to the surface. "Show me," she whispered to the fire. "Show me who hunts us." The flames responded, turning from orange to deep crimson. Images formed in the smoke, fleeting, fragmented, but clear enough. A figure in a hooded robe, hands stained with blood. An altar carved with symbols that hurt to look at. And behind it all, a presence, vast, hungry, ancient. Sarah gasped and pulled back, the vision breaking. Blood dripped from her nose, and Theron was there instantly, steadying her. "What did you see?" "Something old," she managed. "Older than the goddess. Something that should not exist in this world." She wiped the blood away with shaking hands. "The person leading this, they are not doing it for power or revenge. They are doing it because they worship what should remain buried." "A cult," Lord Garrett said, his earlier hostility replaced by grim understanding. "We are facing true believers." "Which makes them far more dangerous than mere criminals," Theron said. He looked at Sarah. "Can you find them? Track them through the flames?" "Perhaps, but it will take time, and the visions may not be clear. Whatever power they serve, it fights back against being seen. Then we start with what we know." Theron turned to his council. "Double the guard on all gifted individuals within the city. Send riders to the outlying territories. Any who carry the goddess's mark should come to Iron Peak where we can protect them. And find me everyone who has survived an encounter with the Shadow Wolves. I want to know everything about how they operate." The council began to disperse, moving with renewed purpose. But Garrett lingered, his eyes on Sarah. "I owe you an apology," he said stiffly. "I rejected you out of fear. Fear of your gift, fear of what others would think. I was a coward." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "You were, but I no longer need your acceptance, Lord Garrett. I have found my purpose elsewhere." He nodded slowly, something like respect flickering across his scarred face. Then he bowed, to her, not to his king, and left. When the chamber finally emptied, Theron and Sarah stood alone among the dying braziers. "You handled that well," he said. "I have had 3 years to practice not caring what they think." She looked at the map still spread across the table. "But this, Theron, what I saw in the flames, if they complete this ritual, they will not," his voice carried absolute conviction, "because we will stop them, together." "You put a great deal of faith in a partnership barely 3 weeks old." "I put faith in what I have seen." He moved closer, his presence warm and solid. "You faced shadow wolves without flinching. You walked through winter without complaint. You stood before a council that once rejected you and proved your worth without apology. That is not weakness, Sarah. That is strength I can build a kingdom on." The words stirred something dangerous in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope, or perhaps something even more complicated. "Tomorrow," she said, stepping back before that feeling could take root, "I will need more fire, larger flames. If I am to track these hunters properly, I will need power beyond what braziers can provide. Then tomorrow we go to the temple. The eternal flame burns there, fire that has not died in 300 years. If anything can amplify your gift, it will be that." "And your son? When will I meet him?" Theron's expression softened. "Soon. First, let him adjust to having his father home. Then I will introduce you properly." He paused. "He will like you, I think. You do not speak to him as if he is fragile. Because he is not. Loss does not make us fragile. It makes us careful." Wise words from one so young. I am 26, not a child. And I am 33, not ancient. His smile was brief, but genuine. "We are neither of us what the world expects, Pathfinder. Perhaps that is why we work." He left her then, called away by duty and the 1,000 demands of kingship. Sarah remained in the council chamber, studying the map with its circle of red marks. Somewhere beyond these walls, enemies gathered. Somewhere in the darkness, ancient powers stirred. But for the first time since her exile, Sarah did not face the shadows alone. The temple stood at Iron Peak's highest point, a structure of white stone and silver filigree that caught the morning light like a crown. Sarah climbed the steps beside Theron, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart beating faster with each rise. The eternal flame waited within. The priestesses tend it day and night, Theron explained as they approached the entrance. It has burned since the city's founding, fed by magic and faith in equal measure. Some say the goddess herself lit it. Do you believe that? I believe it has power. Whether divine or simply ancient, I cannot say. They passed through doors inlaid with lunar symbols and entered a vast circular chamber. At its center, rising from a basin of polished obsidian, burned a flame unlike any Sarah had ever seen. It shifted through colors, white to gold to silver to blue, each hue bleeding into the next like liquid light. 3 priestesses knelt in meditation around it, their heads bowed, their voices murmuring prayers too soft to distinguish. They did not acknowledge the king's arrival, lost in their communion with the sacred fire. Will they allow me to use it? Sarah whispered. They will not stop you. The flame responds to those marked by the goddess. If it accepts you, they will know you belong here. If. The word carried weight. Sarah moved forward slowly, respectfully, until she stood at the basin's edge. Heat washed over her, not burning, but welcoming. The flame danced higher, as if recognizing her presence. She extended her hand, palm open, offering herself to the fire's judgment. The flame leaped to meet her. It poured into her like liquid sunlight, filling every hollow place exile had carved. Power surged through her veins, vast and terrifying and glorious. She gasped, nearly overwhelmed, but held steady. Through the connection, she felt the eternal flame's true nature, not merely fire, but memory. Every prayer spoken before it, every vision shown within it, every soul who had sought guidance from its light. And deeper still, she felt the goddess herself, watching, approving. Show me the enemy, Sarah breathed. Show me who hunts your children. The visions came like a flood. She saw the hooded figure from before, clearer now. A woman, tall and pale, with eyes that held no light. She stood before an altar, deep underground, surrounded by symbols drawn in blood. Around her knelt a dozen others, all gifted, all bound and gagged. The ritual was nearly complete. Sarah pushed deeper, ignoring the pain that came with forcing visions. She needed location, timing, anything that could help them stop this. The woman raised a knife, black iron, ancient, wrong, and began to chant. The bound gifted screamed behind their gags as shadow poured from the altar like smoke. It wrapped around them, feeding on their power, growing stronger with each passing moment. And behind it all, Sarah felt the thing they served, the presence that should not exist. It pressed against the barrier between worlds, hungry and patient and vast beyond comprehension. One more sacrifice, one more death, and the barrier would break. Sarah pulled back with a cry, the vision shattering. She collapsed, and Theron caught her before she could fall into the flames. He carried her away from the basin, holding her as tremors racked her body. "How many?" he demanded. "How many do they have?" 12, all gifted, all still alive. She gripped his arm. "Theron, they are going to complete the ritual tonight, at moonrise. If we do not stop them, where? Beneath the city. There are catacombs I did not know existed. Old places, forbidden places." She closed her eyes, pulling details from fading memory. 3 levels down, past the old foundation, there is a chamber marked with a spiral. That is where they gather. Theron's face hardened into something between fury and determination. "Then we have until moonrise, 7 hours." He stood, gently setting her on her feet, and turned to address the priestesses who had finally looked up from their meditation. "Sound the war bells. Gather every warrior in the city. We have found the enemy, and tonight we end this." The head priestess rose, her ancient face grave. "The eternal flame has shown her the truth. We will pray for your success, Alpha King. Go with the goddess's blessing." They descended from the temple at a run. Theron issued orders as they moved, Zhao Zhao moaning his best warriors, securing the catacombs' known entrances, preparing for battle in close quarters against an enemy who commanded shadow itself. In his private armory, he helped Sarah into light armor, leather and chain, designed for mobility rather than heavy protection. "You do not have to come," he said as he fastened the buckles. "You have already done more than I had any right to ask. Those 12 people are there because of what they are, what I am." She met his eyes. "I will not let them die for carrying the goddess's mark. Then we fight together." He handed her a knife, simple, sharp, balanced for throwing. "Stay close to me. Do not try to be a hero. And if things go wrong, they will not. If they do," he continued firmly, "you run. You get out and you seal the catacombs behind you. Do you understand? I understand that you're asking me to abandon you if the battle turns. I am asking you to survive, for Kieran's sake, if not your own. He has already lost his mother. I will not have him lose the only other person who might understand what he carries." The words hit harder than any blade. Sarah realized with sudden clarity that Theron saw her not just as an ally or even a partner, but as someone who could help raise his son. Someone who could teach Kieran to embrace rather than fear any gifts he might inherit. "I will survive," she promised, "but so will you." He smiled, brief and fierce. "Then let us make it so." They gathered in the castle's lower levels, 50 warriors, hand-picked for skill and courage. Theron stood before them, every inch the Alpha King his people needed. "What we face tonight is an abomination, an enemy that seeks to destroy not just our kingdom, but everyone marked by the goddess. They have taken 12 of our gifted, 12 souls who deserve our protection." His voice carried through the chamber. "We go now to bring them home, to end this threat, and to remind the darkness that Iron Peak does not yield." The warriors roared approval, beating swords against shields. They descended into the catacombs through a hidden entrance in the castle's foundation. The air grew colder with each level, thick with age and secrets. Torches cast dancing shadows on walls, carved with names of the dead, centuries of souls laid to rest in the city's bones. Sarah led them deeper, following the path the eternal flame had shown her. The spiral marking appeared exactly where her vision had placed it, carved into stone, worn smooth by time. Beyond it, the passage opened into a vast chamber lit by torches that burned with sickly green light. And there, just as she had foreseen, knelt 12 bound figures around an altar slick with blood. The pale woman stood at the altar's head, knife raised, beginning the final incantation. "Now!" Theron roared. The warriors charged, and the battle began. Chaos erupted in the Chamber of Shadows. Theron's warriors clashed with the cultists, men and women who fought with the fervor of true believers, their eyes empty of everything but devotion to the thing they served. Steel rang against steel, and screams echoed off ancient stone. Sarah ran for the bound gifted, knife in hand. The first she reached was a young girl, no more than 16, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah cut her bonds and pulled the gag free. "Run!" she commanded. "Follow the spiral markings back to the surface." The girl scrambled away, and Sarah moved to the next prisoner. And the next. Around her, the battle raged, Theron at its heart, his blade singing as it cut down cultist after cultist. But for every enemy that fell, Shadows rose to take their place. The pale woman's chanting grew louder, more frenzied. The altar pulsed with sick light, and the air itself began to tear. "Sarah!" Theron's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop the ritual!" She freed the last prisoner and turned toward the altar. The pale woman's eyes met hers, empty, utterly empty, and smiled. "Too late, child. The barrier breaks. The Ancient One comes." Behind her, reality split open. What emerged defied description. A thing of shadow and hunger, too vast to fully exist in this world, but forcing itself through anyway. Its presence was agony, pressing against Sarah's mind like a physical weight. The warriors fell back, their courage failing in the face of something their steel could not harm. But Sarah did not retreat. She called fire. It answered. The eternal flame's power still coursed through her veins, vast and terrible, and hers to command. She pulled it forth, shaping it into a weapon of pure light that filled the chamber like a second sun. The shadow thing recoiled, shrieking in a voice that shattered stone. "Close the tear." Theron was beside her suddenly, his hand finding hers. "You have the power. I can feel it. But you need an anchor. Something to hold you while you burn." She understood. The eternal flame could destroy this abomination. But using that much power would consume her unless someone grounded her to the physical world. "It will hurt you," she warned. "I have survived worse." His grip tightened. "Do it." Sarah reached deep into herself, past fear and doubt, past everything except pure will. She became the bridge between eternal flame and mortal world, channeling power that should have destroyed her. But Theron held firm. Through their joined hands, he bore half the burden, his alpha strength absorbing what would have killed her. Together, they directed the flames at the tear in reality, not to seal it, but to burn away everything trying to force through. The shadow thing screamed and writhed, its form disintegrating under the onslaught. The pale woman threw herself at them, knife raised. But one of the warriors intercepted her. She fell, and her death broke the ritual completely. The tear collapsed. The flames died. Sarah and Theron dropped to their knees, gasping, their hands still clasped. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by breathing, the crackle of dying torches, and the quiet sobs of the rescued gifted. "Is it over?" someone asked. Theron looked at Sarah. She closed her eyes and reached for her gift, searching the flames for any trace of remaining threat. Nothing. Only ash and memory. "It is over," she confirmed. The warriors erupted in cheers. They had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that commanded shadow itself, they had won. But Sarah felt only exhaustion and relief as Theron pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You did it," he murmured. "You saved them all. We did it. Together." And there, in the depths beneath Iron Peak, surrounded by warriors and rescued souls, something shifted between them. The partnership forged in necessity deepened into something neither of them had sought but both recognized. Not love, not yet. But the foundation for it, built on trust and sacrifice and survival. They emerged from the catacombs as the moon rose, full and silver and beautiful. The rescued gifted were taken to the temple for healing. The warriors dispersed to celebrate their victory. Theron and Sarah stood in the castle courtyard, looking up at the stars. "My son," Theron said quietly. "I should check on him, make sure the noise did not frighten him. May I come with you?" He looked at her, something soft and vulnerable in his expression. "I would like that." They climbed to the royal quarters, where a nursemaid sat outside a door carved with wolves and moons. She stood when she saw Theron, relief flooding her face. "He has been asking for you, Your Majesty." "Then let us not keep him waiting." They entered a chamber painted with stars, where a small boy sat in bed, clutching a wooden horse. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and when he saw Theron, his face lit up like sunrise. "Papa!" Theron crossed the room and scooped him up, holding him close. "I am here, little wolf. I am here. You were gone so long, I was scared. I know, I am sorry." Theron set him down and gestured to Sarah. "Kieran, this is my friend Sarah. She helped me come home." The boy studied her with solemn curiosity. "Are you magic like Papa says?" Sarah knelt to meet his eyes. "I am. I can show you if you like." She held out her palm and called a small flame. Nothing dangerous, just a dancing light that shifted through colors like the eternal flame. Kieran's eyes went wide with wonder. "It is beautiful," he breathed. "Can you teach me?" "Perhaps, when you are older." She let the flame die. "For now you should sleep. Your father needs rest, too." "Will you stay?" Kieran asked. "So Papa is not lonely?" The innocent question carried weight neither child nor king could fully understand. Sarah looked at Theron, seeing hope and fear and possibility in his silver eyes. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." Theron tucked his son into bed and sang him a lullaby in a language Sarah did not recognize. When Kieran finally slept, they retreated to the corridor. "Thank you," Theron said, "for everything, for saving those people, for helping me build something worth protecting, for being here. Where else would I be? Anywhere. You earned your freedom tonight. You could leave Iron Peak, start fresh somewhere the past cannot find you." Sarah considered the idea for approximately 3 seconds. And abandon a king who needs a pathfinder? A child who deserves to learn his gifts are not curses? A kingdom that finally has someone who understands what I am? She shook her head. "No, Theron. I have spent enough time running from my purpose. I choose to stay." "Then stay not as my subject or my tool, but as your partner," she finished. "I know. You have made that clear." I was going to say friend, but partner works too. They stood in the starlit corridor, the weight of the day finally settling over them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, hunting the remnants of the cult, protecting the gifted who would flock to Iron Peak seeking safety, rebuilding trust in a kingdom shaken by shadow. But tonight, they had won. Tonight, they had saved 12 lives and stopped an abomination from entering the world. Tonight, they had proven that fire and blood, Omega and Alpha, could forge something stronger than either alone. "Come," Theron said, offering his hand. "Let me show you your new quarters. They are in the East Wing, near the council chambers. Close enough to be useful, far enough to have privacy. Practical. And there is a balcony with a perfect view of the sunrise. I thought you might appreciate that." She took his hand, letting him lead her through the castle that was somehow, impossibly, becoming home. Behind them, Kieran slept peacefully, guarded by warriors and magic. Above them, the moon shone bright and knowing. And ahead of them stretched a future neither could have imagined 3 weeks ago, complicated, dangerous, and filled with possibility. Sarah had come to Iron Peak expecting nothing but duty. She found purpose, she found partnership. And perhaps in time, she would find something even more precious. But that was a story for another night, another moon, another chapter yet to be written. For now, she walked beside a king who had seen her worth toward a future she had chosen, carrying fire that would never again be called a curse. The goddess had marked her for suffering, yes, but also for redemption. And redemption, Sarah was learning, wore many faces, including that of an alpha king who understood what it meant to be broken, and a child who reminded them both why healing mattered. The eternal flame burned in its temple. The moon blessed them from above. And in Iron Peak, where stone met sky, 2 pathfinders began the work of forging a kingdom strong enough to weather any shadow. Together. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.